Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn if you're new here, and today I'm doing my July wrap-up. Let's just get started and not waste any time. First up, we have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. This is a collection of short stories, and it's like a horror collection, which is really fun, and it is all stories have a little bit of the bizarre, the unusual, the haunted. There are some supernatural elements in these stories, and as tends to happen with a short story collection, there are some that are better than others. I didn't love all of the stories. I think some of them just didn't do enough. It has more of the vibe of horror, and it is uncomfortable to read a lot of them, which I enjoyed, but they're more of like a quiet, uncomfortable, seething type of horror rather than an in-your-face, which I do like. I think by far my favorite was the story about the kids who come back. That was by far the best story. Some of them, like what was it called? The cart. The cart was also really interesting. But again, it's more of like a quiet horror, but I enjoyed it. I think like averaged out to a 3-star, but I really, really enjoyed Kids Who Come Back. That was very, very uncomfortable and scary and bizarre. Like my brand of horror. I don't love something supernatural or totally unbelievable. That's why I really enjoyed I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. So I was looking for something more in that vein, but this was still a really fun read, and I think if you like horror, you will like this. So I gave this a 3-star. Then we have another new release, and that is Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Galchen. So this is a very strange book as well. So this is set in the 1600s. We are following a much older woman, and she is accused of being a witch. Basically, the community that she lives in, they all turn on her. She owns a certain amount of property, and people owe her money, so they start turning on her and accusing her of being a witch to essentially get out of that. And there are a lot of like pent-up resentments and dynamics that are going on for which she gets singled out. So this book is strange because it's set in the 1600s, but there is absolutely no historical elements to this book. And what I mean by that is like there's no world building. There's no elements to like set you in 1618. It's just, we're here. Here's this old woman who's accused of being a witch, and now let's hear her being interviewed and her explaining her side of the story. So I think this book's appeal is more of it has like the quippy type of entertaining, dry humor, and there were moments of humor in this book, and this old woman is like set in her ways, and she's like, everyone's ridiculous, and it has those elements, but I think this book didn't do enough for me in any elements. Like obviously, like I said, there's absolutely no historical elements to this book. It could have been set right now, and maybe that's the point. But when I read a book set in like the 15 or 1600s, I want all the historical elements. I want to feel like I'm there, and this book didn't do that at all. And even the humor, I think it just wasn't enough to sustain the whole book. Like it wasn't it wasn't funny enough or quirky enough. And by the end of it, I kind of just started feeling fairly bored, but I do think people would like this. It's like a quick, kind of punchy book. I liked the idea more than the execution. So I gave this one like a 2.5. Like the cover though, so points for having a cool cover. And then we have The Death of Vivek OJ by Akwaeke Emezi. So, you may know that I absolutely loved Freshwater and Dear Thurin by Akwaeke Emezi, and this is the next on my list. I was so excited to read it. This book is about somebody named Vivek and their life, and it opens up with Vivek's body being discovered by their mom on the front porch, kind of naked, wrapped in some sort of sheet or something, and so we know right from the get-go that Vivek is going to die, and then we basically trace their life through the eyes of the people who love them. We very rarely hear from Vivek. It's more of, their parent, their cousin, their best friends, and then little snippets of Vivek's voice, which make him all the more special. But my goodness, I loved this book. It is a challenging book. It's heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And I think it's interesting because it's a different kind of setup, right? When you know that your main character is dead, is going to die on the very first page, and then kind of the emotional payoff of that is very different when you know they're going to die, but you still you fall in love with them through watching them through everyone else's eyes and seeing Vivek was kind of not understood at all by his parents. He was very sensitive and quiet and demure, and his relationship with his cousin, I think, is really beautiful and heartbreaking, and it is just basically watching this person figure themselves out and have such a beautiful spirit, but kind of be trampled by the world. It was absolutely stellar. I gave it a 5-star. I don't think there's one thing that I didn't love about this book. It was absolutely harrowing, but it was also beautiful, and all the different relationships. I don't even know what to say. I think really it's Emezi's writing that makes it so strong. It definitely has the same tone of Freshwater, but a completely different storyline and cast of characters. Okay, so next we have Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. So you may know that I am trying to work my way through all of Moshfegh's books. I have loved everything I've read by her so far, and this is a weird one, which is saying something because all of her books are really weird. But we're following another elderly woman, which again, I appreciate. I appreciate hearing their voice. We don't often get to hear from their perspective in a lot of literature. So this opens with an old woman going on a walk with her dog, and she discovers a letter on their trail that says, her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here's her dead body. It's just a letter. There's no body there, but our narrator becomes obsessed. And so suddenly obsessed that you already know something's not exactly right. She becomes haunted by this mysterious Magda and basically dedicates her entire life to solving this mystery of this note, who killed her, where's her body, but really more, who was she? Who could she have been? And she gets kind of lost in the imaginings and lost in these cycles of obsessive thought, and it is a wild ride. She kind of is used to a very monotonous, quiet life living with her dog, and she is quick to grab onto something and chase it down and get an answer. But really our narrator is fascinating. She's so interesting. Basically, like all of Moshfegh's narrators, they're the best part. Basically, I love her for her characters. And this is no exception. I don't think I loved this as much as, say, Eileen. I know that people even who love Moshfegh are divided on this book, and I definitely land in the higher star rating. I gave it a 4. I did really like it, but I don't think that the character was as intriguing as, say, Eileen, but the plot was very bizarre and very interesting, and it really is about this kind of isolation and these obsessive thoughts and these kind of falling into creepy, dangerous thought patterns and kind of getting sucked into those, but also almost like a trauma that your mind is trying to process. So it's like a haunting little book. I really enjoyed it. I just feel like Moshfegh can't do any wrong. So yeah, I'm one of those. So I gave this a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. It is a little bit strange, a little bit horrifying, will kind of get stuck in your head, which is always a good thing in my opinion. Then we have another strange, kind of a haunting book. This is Mona by Pola Oloixarac. Oloixarac. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. But this is Mona, and this is about a young woman who is a writer, and she has been put up for this writing award and is traveling with a group of writers to go to this kind of retreat or ceremony where the winner will be announced at the end of the weekend or whatever it is, however long it is. And it is a very short little book, and there are mentions throughout, very brief, of like bruises on her body, and you know that something has happened to this woman, but she almost throws herself into this writer's convention or writer's ceremony to not have to address those things. They're always kind of creeping in the back of her mind and in our mind as readers, but nothing is super forward or blunt or in your face. It's like a quiet trauma that she is clearly dealing with. But like I said, she throws herself into her surroundings and into the people around her, and a lot of this book, like I said, it is very small, but a lot of this book is taken up with her observations about the other people around her. She is highly critical of them. She's not doing super great, like I mentioned, and that's the majority of the book. But I don't think that we got enough Mona. I really wanted like all of her. I wanted to know more about her because the parts that we did get were so interesting and she was such a compelling character. But like I said, because she's kind of trying to process this trauma, she's focusing more on where she is and the people around her, which I think is smart in terms of what the plot is and what the author was trying to get to. But in terms of the actual process, I don't think I enjoyed it that much. And then this is like a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't, it's not a spoiler in terms of what happened. Well, I'm just going to say it's a spoiler for like 10-15 seconds, and I'll put a little thing. Riley doesn't want to know the spoiler. Riley, chill. So, the kind of not really spoiler is that she talks about a lot that you could tell something has happened to her, and she is very, very traumatized, but we don't get, like I said, it's not super explained to us, and then the last few pages of this book are so violent and brutal, and because it's always like a simmering trauma and a simmering kind of secretive event, that really like shocked me, and I think it's supposed to, but I just was not prepared for it. So definitely be warned of that like this book is like a creeping, quiet kind of a book, and then all of a sudden it is in your face, so violent and brutal, like one of the most aggressive things I've read so far this year, and I just wasn't prepared. I think maybe I wasn't like tracing the violence enough throughout the book. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention. Maybe I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. So it just was a lot. So be warned of that. But I liked it. I think it was an interesting story and like a character study through not focusing on the character, if that makes sense. But it's a really short book. It's a quick read, and I think it's really interesting. I gave this one a 3-star. I just wanted more Mona. And then we have one that I did not love, unfortunately. This is Tyll by Daniel Kehlmann. And I think this one disappointed me so much because if you've watched my channel, then you know that I should have loved this. On paper, I should have loved this. This is set during the 30 Years' War. It is a very strange historical fiction. We are following an infamous, famous trickster character named Tyll. And he comes into contact with all of these different, like Elizabeth Stewart shows up in this book, and he basically becomes like a court jester, but we follow him almost like his origin story, like a little Marvel moment as a child, and then he kind of goes off and joins a circus, and it's very, very strange, and like I said in my vlog where I talked about this, almost like a Princess Bride historical fiction tone, if you know what I mean. Like, it's very whimsical and funny, and because it is set in the 30 Years' War, they see some real violence and brutality and absolute awful things. But because of Tyll's personality, he satirizes everything. He makes fun of everything. He is willing to go there and talk about things that are very uncomfortable in a very funny, like quippy kind of way. Which is really, really interesting and a very, I think, fun and unique way to look at historical events that kind of seem larger than life. But I think where this book lost me was the different timelines jumped around a lot. And it wasn't like, he's a little kid, then we jump to him as a young adult, then we jump to him as like a 50-year-old, it was like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I just found it irritating. The thing is, and where I have a hard time talking about this book, is that there were some moments and some like specific scenes, especially in his childhood, that I thought were amazing. But then it got way too messy. I got annoyed. I got just like over the style of it. If it had maybe been much shorter, maybe I would have preferred it. But I'm just kind of torn on this book because I really expected to love it, just because that's my thing. I love a medieval kind of a historical fiction, but yeah, I just didn't end up loving it. Then we have, guys, I'm so excited to talk about this book and I haven't prepared any notes. I'm just like word vomiting at you. But we have Borne by Jeff VanderMeer. So, again, if you are familiar with my channel, you know that Jeff VanderMeer has my whole heart and soul. I love his books so desperately. So, backtrack. You should know by now that I absolutely loved the Southern Reach trilogy by him. That is Annihilation, Authority, and Acceptance. They are my favorite books of all time, probably. All three of them make it onto my favorite books of my entire life. And then I also read this year Hummingbird Salamander, which I gave a 4 out of 5. Again, I loved the themes, but I didn't love the actual book as much. And I had just been chasing the original high of Annihilation, and I have found it. I am so happy I can't even explain, but now let me tell you what this book's about, because you're going to think I'm crazy. This is about a post-apocalyptic city that is run and basically run into the ground by the company. This company, this entity, began bioengineering things and essentially setting them loose on the city. So, that is where we come to Mord. He is this absolutely massive, larger-than-life bioengineered bear who can fly, and he goes and wreaks havoc on the city. So, that is where we just start off. But because he is kind of floating and flying around the city and landing and killing everyone and causing chaos and destroying everything, he like picks up little scavengers, and people climb up him because everyone is starving and there's little to no resources, and people climb up him and like grab these little things that like stick into his fur. So that is where we come to our main character, Rachel. She is one of these scavengers that climbs up Mord's great body and collects things that she thinks might be useful. So one day, when she is like on his flank, she finds this little sea creature, and she names it Borne. She brings it home to Wick, her partner, and Wick is immediately not about it. He does not trust this little creature, even though it looks harmless. He does not trust it, and a lot of the book is about this relationship between Rachel and Wick. Wick, in his past, had worked for the company, and now it's really them as a unit trying to survive. But he immediately does not want Borne in their home. He does not trust it, but Rachel feels this almost motherly connection to Borne and is unwilling to get rid of it no matter what. So therein lies some issues that might arise. But this book, I know it sounds insane and like it makes absolutely no sense, but I swear to God, this book is so fucking brilliant. I can't, like, there's no words for me to actually explain how fantastic this book is. It is really about ecological disaster and destruction and capitalism and how we're destroying our world and power dynamics and trusting somebody and being willing to give your trust to something that perhaps you shouldn't because you're so desperate for connection. Rachel is a very, very interesting narrator, and basically we are watching her as she gets herself into trouble. But it really, this book at its core is about personhood and relationships and how we define personhood and who we give that to. And who we let into our little bubble and our world when everything around us is chaos and destruction. This is a book that as I was reading it, I wanted so desperately to get to the end because I wanted to figure it out, while I also didn't want to finish it because I loved it so, so much. And then as soon as I closed the book, I was like non-stop thinking about it for days after. Like, it is one that I immediately wanted to reread because of where it went. I wanted to go back and follow it again, just like the Southern Reach trilogy. I really do think that VanderMeer is like an absolute genius. I don't know what else to say about it. I just want you to read it so badly. This is my favorite book of the year that I've read so far. Pure Nisi has been bumped. I can say that. I just think it is so genius, and like everything that I have wanted in a book for so long since finishing the Southern Reach trilogy by VanderMeer. It is weird. It is absolutely bizarre, and I know it sounds a little bit off-putting when I'm like, oh, it's about a bioengineered flying bear that destroys a city. And that is true. It is absolutely about that. I want you to know that going in. But it is really about relationships and trust and Jeffrey Bezos, probably. I just think this book is genius. And I cannot wait to continue in the series. The second one is called Dead Astronauts, which make a little bit of an appearance in this book, but are mysterious. But maybe I'll do like a standalone review of this book, because I know I'm not doing it justice right now because I'm so overwhelmed by how much I loved it. But really, his writing is so superb. It's so like the tension, he builds it so well, and you never trust our narrators, but you like only have them to trust. You have no one else, so you cling to their voice and to their narration while you know that you really shouldn't. It is so bizarre, but absolutely, like, I cried. Did I even mention that? I cried. The only other book I've cried at this year is Transcendent Kingdom by Agassi. I do not cry at books, and I cried about a book about a bioengineered bear and a little sea creature who nobody knows what the fuck it is. Because it really is heartbreaking. I can't even explain it, but I also think that this book is like genius on every single level, and I'm so sorry I'm rambling on and you don't want to hear about it anymore, but this is my favorite book I've read this year. I loved it. I loved it. Oh my god, I loved it. Read it. Okay, we are coming to our last two books, so do not fret. We have Big Tome. We have The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I have an entire blog about this, so I will not talk about it too much, but I also might. So, this is a massive book. It is a historical fiction set during the gold rush in New Zealand. Not something that I thought I was particularly interested in, or learning about that historical period, but damn, have I been turned. So, yes, it is massive, and please don't be intimidated. It is so, so good. So, we are following a whole slew, massive cast of characters, and it starts with a very strange scene of Walter Moody, who is kind of our main point of centering ourselves in this big cast of characters, but you will get to know everybody pretty fully. So Walter Moody has come to make his fortune in the gold rush. He shows up at this tavern, and there is a very strange group of characters who are very quiet and brooding and mysterious, and he kind of gets himself involved in this conversation that is about a series of crimes that has happened in the past few days, weeks, whatever it is. And these crimes are a prostitute has tried to kill herself, a man has been found dead at his home with a ton of gold. What's the other crime? And a wealthy man who kind of runs this whole thing has vanished. But where this book kind of maybe turns people off but also makes people interested is that at the start of every section or chapter even, there is a little, I don't know what it's called because I don't know anything about astrology, but it has something to do with astrology. A little chart. What is that? Somebody tell me. Who knows? With all of the characters' names, and at the beginning there's like a little bit like Mercury and Sagittarius, and then it like gives a little blurb of what the entire chapter is going to be about, and then it proceeds to tell you the story of how we get there. So, like I say, I know literally nothing about astrology other than that I'm a Taurus, and that's why I'm stubborn, and that's the limit and extent of my knowledge. The first, like, this much, the whole first 75% is taken up with setting the scene, telling you what has happened so far, who knows what, and kind of going back to that meeting that Walter Moody stumbles upon, where everyone is sharing information and trying to figure out what's happened. Because they all have heard different things. They're all involved to some extent or another, these like 12 plus characters. And we are following them as these events have transpired. Then the next, like, remaining of the book, so this part is a little bit slow, but it's all about character development, creating the scene. Eleanor Catton has so much plot to set down that, like, you can't even yell at her for making the book so long, because she has so much to write and to make the reader understand. There's so many characters and so many different plot lines going on. She has to explain it to us, or we'd be lost. But then the next remaining section, you're getting whiplash. The chapters are like this short. You are bouncing, 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 and that really just is so different from the beginning that it's so fun, and you're like, oh my god, now I'm getting it, now I'm getting it. This book is like good old-fashioned storytelling. It is an ode, massive ode, to storytelling. You can tell that Eleanor Catton is like a genius in the way that her mind is working, putting all these pieces together. And yes, sometimes it's slow, but the payoff is why I loved it. So I gave this book a 4-star. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Last book. Guys, this is pretty quick. Am I pretty quick? No. Okay. Braiding Sweetgrass. I just put up a vlog about this. This is by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This was a beautiful book. So it's a collection of essays, and Robin Wall Kimmerer is a botanist. She's a scientist. She is also a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. So this book is basically her love letter to botany, to nature, to the indigenous knowledge that she grew up with, and that is so ingrained in her study of the world and her appreciation of the world around her. This book gave me like what the Overstory gave me by Richard Powers, but like 10 times better. She really explains and makes the nature and the forests that she goes into to study and to kind of center herself. She really describes them in such a beautiful way, and you can really tell. Well, actually, I read the first part of this book, the physical copy, and then I started listening to it and hearing her voice. It makes it so much better. I really enjoyed listening to it. You can really hear her love and appreciation to the world around her. And like I say in that video that vlog where I talk about it, a lot of the stories that I loved the most are her talking about mothering, which is really interesting because she talks about mothering her children, mothering her environment, and kind of marrying those two, because caring for your earth is caring for your children and for the generation of children to come. I thought it was absolutely stunning. Her writing is beautiful, beautiful. I absolutely loved it. A 5 out of 5. This book is, I like tabbed everything because my sister's gonna read it, and I'm like, no, you need to focus on this, and then you need to focus on this, and you need to focus on this. Those are the books that I read in July. But yes, I'm going to stop talking. I feel like I thought that this video was shorter, and then it wasn't, so I'm sorry. But please read Borne. Let me know your favorite book you read in July, what of my selection you've read and loved, or what you're just interested to read. Please subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you very soon in my next video. Bye, everyone.